All right, everyone. Considering the fact that we're in the post-truth era, now everyone just cherry picks polls. I'm going to do the same thing. So Trump is now at 50% approval, 49% disapproval, which is actually, all things considered, not particularly bad, considering that for the last year, he has had virtually nothing but negative coverage on cable and by radio. And the only real corner of information that comes out about politics at all that's not 100% anti-Trump mode is really on the internet, which could also be a testament to the power of the alt media, which could be why CNN is going after InfoWars right now, and I'll be getting into that in a couple of videos actually later. Well, we got to talk about this. This is on RCP, and Rasmussen in the last few elections, prior to 2016, was not particularly compelling. It was off by 4 or 5 points, I believe, for 3 elections in a row. Didn't do very well. In this last election, they got it pretty close to right. I think they were off by a point. The closest was actually one of those web-only polling firms, which is funny because Rasmussen, the way they do it is they poll landlines. They do it by phone. Typically, that means that when they're polling people, they're disproportionately polling people who are a bit older, a bit more likely to be maybe retired or something. They have time to answer their landline because that's included within their methodology. However, this does corroborate at least slightly. Now, the last poll that RCP had that showed, I believe, a 49-49 split, that's pretty close. It's not far removed from a corroboration of a poll that was already conducted. Now, I believe that was a Gallup poll. And there's no room for saying that they're exactly skewing things in favor of Trump. So it looks like Trump has more or less completely recovered all lost ground over the course of a year. Now, let's speculate that that's true, which is, it would be reasonable to suggest that that's true, because it would only be a few points higher than the average I considered him likely to be at for some time. The thing is, you got a lot of polls. CNN conducts a poll. Yeah, probably it's going to show lower support. They're not interested in conducting an unbiased poll. They're interested in skewing that poll. They have continuously been doing that. If that indeed is the case, if Trump has recovered, it's because of 3 things, I think. Number 1, the economy has taken off. It is growing. It's not something that can be debated over. The economy is growing faster now. It's adding jobs at a good clip. Wages have begun to rise, not just because of tax proposals. Things are getting better on the economic end for ma and pa America. Number 2 would be the stock market, actually. Now, this has nothing whatsoever to do with Main Street, but it gives people more confidence. When they see tails, when even CNN has to report, yeah, the stock market, it's at its record high, and they have to report on that for a month, it gives people more confidence. More investment, thus, because higher confidence can occur. Business taxes being lowered as well is a good thing. And number 3 would be, I think, the tax plan. Most people seem to enjoy the idea. I know I do. Because looking at the situation, it appears that it's going to save the average American a shit ton of money. I think that's a good thing. I think the government should have less of our money. Go ahead. It doesn't really matter what you cut. The left is always like, well, they never talk about cutting the military budget. Go ahead. If it saves people money, private civilians, yeah, sure. Go ahead and cut some of the military spending. You can do that now by taking away some of the no-bid contracts. You could probably cut the total by 10, 20% very, very easily. Yeah, that pays for the tax cuts. No worries. As for the counter-argument being currently employed on the economic end, that is twofold. The Democrats are using a twofold argument to try to, cheapen Trump's image when it comes to jobs and money, because he's a money president. The first is, oh, well, Obama already had a recovery and, Trump is just continuing it, just wait, the collapse is coming any day now, that sort of mentality. That it's still the Obama recovery despite the fact that, things considerably changed the second that Trump got into office. And despite the fact, you'll remember this, Krugman and everybody else, every media organization and pundit were declaring the economy will collapse if Trump is elected. Instead, the opposite happens. Growth and job creation and wages all tick upwards. Stock market begins to soar. Now it's leveled off a little bit, but it's still near its record highs, higher than it ever was under Obama. That's the first part of their argument. The second part of their argument was that it would be bad for middle and lower class America, or conversely to that, ignoring that it will increase the deficit. Oh, the deficit will get higher. The debt will begin to grow faster. Nobody cares about it. That was a losing. The Republicans tried to use that argument against Obama. It was their weakest argument. Totally their weakest argument. There are all sorts of things that they could say that helped them in their fight against Obama's mandate as far as popular voting went. They successfully employed some of these things, saying, well, the debt and the deficit wasn't one of them because people began to notice fairly quickly, oh, you mean that debt? Bush ran up, 5 or 6 trillion by the time he left office, based only on wars that Obama simply continued and largely converted into covert operations that arguably, at least on the surface, cost less. The Pentagon probably still has to make up a little bit of extra off the books, but, it works out as far as his public image goes. Now, people began to notice that a Republican had begun the process of increasing that debt. Obama, meanwhile, for 8 years added to the debt, soaring beyond, all recall. The Democrats cannot logically and reasonably make the argument, I think, to centrist America, to people who are on the center, left, or right, people who are, normal Americans, you would think of, within the Overton window. It's going to be hard to convince them that all of a sudden the deficit matters now that Trump is in office when they're taking home more money. It's going to be real difficult. So when I look at this poll, corroborating the last, more or less, a 49-49 split versus 50-49, it's pretty close polling. That's pretty close to the mark of where I would assume he'd be at this point too, because for months now, he's been a money president. Anybody who will never approve of Trump because of Russia already disapproves of Trump. You got to realize, though, that's only about 40% of the politically active population that's going to participate in a poll anyway, or that's likely to vote. There's your Democratic partisans, your actual left, more other than those that wanted to punish Clinton by voting for Trump because she's shafted Bernie and they're further left economically. There's your Democratic partisans, your left, and some never-Trump GOPers who are like, oh, well, we need to be the party of I don't know, we need to be the party of George W. because those were such good times. 10 people who believe that. Those are the people that they'll never vote for Trump. They will never approve of Trump. He does have a ceiling. However, much like during the election, remember during the election for months when they said, oh, Trump has a low ceiling, that's why he'll lose. He'll lose because he's having difficulty getting him, what was it, 30%, or 35% or so in these states. And they're like, well, as the herd thins out, if someone drops out, all of their votes don't go to Trump. He is the only person who cannot absorb another person's votes because he's part of a cult of personality. Now, Ted Cruz was definitely the same. Rand arguably was the same, before he left the race, and Trump absorbed most of that. Ben Carson certainly had the same issue. Everybody else had a low ceiling. Not Trump. Trump didn't really have a ceiling. What he had was a high floor. I predict the same now. When you look at polling, during the worst period for Trump, he was at the high 30s, low 40s. You're telling me, essentially, what that tells me, because it was stable for so long, it tells me that about a third of the U.S. population is rock-ribbed in favor of Trump. They are permanently more or less on the Trump train. About a third of the politically active population. That is considerably higher than the support that the GOP or the Democratic Party as totals have. Significantly higher. Significantly higher. Therefore, he has an advantage. Again, going into the midterms, in any race where, Trump won the area or was competitive enough, they're going to want Trump to speak for them, I think, on the campaign trail. The Republicans will, absolutely. Anywhere else, probably not. But going into 2020, he's got about a third of the population sewn up. And that third is not just, hey, Republican partisans, I voted for every Republican since Dwight Eisenhower. That's not what his voting bloc entails. Because of the job and economy side of his platform, and because so far, by all means, he's done relatively well with that, he is absorbing more support in exactly the kind of areas he needs. The Rust Belt. That's exactly where the added support is coming. It's not coming from the Southwest, where Republicans are increasingly a bunch of liberals. It's not down in the Southwest, in Nevada or some California GOP conglomerate, in Arizona and Utah, Romney and McCain land. No, that's the never-Trump portion of the country, really. His support is rising, and arguably here in parts of northern New England. This puts New Hampshire and Maine both very much in play, by the way, as well as in the Rust Belt, the two areas he wants to focus on, maybe in Florida too. He probably, on the gun control argument, Unless he continues to harangue on how, bump stocks are a bad thing, he probably wins Florida again. That gives him the election, dude. He can jettison Michigan and Wisconsin back to the Democrats. I think that still puts him well above. I think that puts him up around 290 still, or thereabouts. He still wins. Hell, I think at that point, I think he could lose an additional, middling state as far as population. I don't think he will. I think, if anything, it's possible he gains Minnesota and New Hampshire in the next election. And again, for a year I was predicting stuff like this in 2016. A lot of people, even who like Trump, didn't think that it would happen. And lo and behold, I think I actually slightly underestimated support for him. I didn't see him getting, I think it was Wisconsin, I didn't, say would be his, and it was. And I think there was one other state. Which state was it? I thought Colorado might lean towards him, and I think it went blue, so maybe that was the other one. All things considered, though, I actually slightly underestimated his power during the election. I think Virginia was the other one. No, North Carolina. Actually, I think I saw it staying blue. If I remember correctly. I'd have to go back and check the map that I ran the day before the election. I think he does well. 50% approval would be roughly on par with expectations. This time he hasn't crowed about that fact as much. Early on, he was like, oh yeah, I'm above 50% approval, making me, popular, basically. He's not doing that so much. I think that that's strategic in nature. I think there's no reason at this point for him to do that. He's got his hardened fan base, and he knows on jobs in the economy, if he continues to do well, a lot of centrists, certainly the center-right, will vastly support him. That brings him pretty damn close to the voting coalition he actually needs when you consider, again, there will be disaffected Democrats, I think, within the Democratic Party come the next election. Either a neoliberal comes and the left is disaffected, or they try to go further left and end up further alienating Rust Belt middle-class blue voters, Union Democrats, who will go Reagan mode and vote for Trump anyway. Now, again, I say this, I've been criticizing Trump. I'll be criticizing him on guns again today. I'm critical of him on that. I've been critical on Syria. There are some things I vastly disagree with Donald Trump on. That being said, though, that doesn't matter. That's personal bias. It has nothing to do with whether he wins or loses or what his popularity is, because I'm just one in several 100 million people contributing to the overall numbers that you would see there. I would say, generally speaking, I would generally approve of the job that he's doing. Certainly on the economy, I vastly approve. On anything related to jobs, taxes, economics in general, foreign policy, I have no problem with him. Now, I would say so far his weak spot has really been domestic social policy. Sessions with the drug war, alienating maybe some of his, further right, gun-friendly fans. Those are problems for him at this point. But he's got 2 for 3. That's pretty good. That's roughly where Obama would have been at. And here's the wonderful thing. What he's chosen to really run on, which is jobs in the economy, is likely to continuously more or less improve for several years. It's not going to be like Obama, who won on social issues that disappeared the second the Democrats backed the Republicans down or the Tea Party formed a wall and refused to move. All of a sudden you stopped hearing about him. And I don't think he's likely to have the kind of actual scandal that Obama had, like with the NSA. The Russia stuff's at this point isn't a scandal. Anyone who cares about the vague possibility that Mueller's probe turns up some dirt closer to Trump than Paul Manafort 10 years ago isn't supporting Trump. He has nothing whatsoever to lose from the probe occurring, if anything. It's going to bore people at some point. And when people realize there's no actual link between Trump and Russia, which is, I believe, true, then he probably scores a few extra points of approval. It'd be really funny if Mueller did that like a month before the midterms and all of a sudden the GOP gains a couple more points. I think they're still up now in the congressional ballot. There are polls showing them that they're ahead of the Democrats right now. What does this say for the Democrats? It cast Trump off. Worst president ever, according to the New York Times. Lies all the time. Hates the First Amendment, attacking the media. In other words, the corporate media. The CNN, multinational firms, the Wall Street fucking Journal and stuff. He's a bigot. He's orange. He's got heart disease. They throw literally everything that they can at him. He's the Teflon Don. He's sort of like another Bill Clinton in that sense. In fact, I think Clinton's better when it comes to this sort of thing. I think he can outlast them. I'm not surprised that his approval is at the very least up. At the very least, it has grown. The only reason it could be growing is due to jobs in the economy and taxes. It can't be growing because of social policy. It can't be growing due to foreign policy. it has to be money-wise. That's about all. Peace out.